Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. So as many of you guys would have seen on two of my last previous videos, I told you all we were going to release the new car I had purchased. Now, before we get into the video and I reveal to you what car this actually is, some of it may shock you, some of it might not. Some of you will love it and others will not. Everyone has their own opinion based on cars, like everyone does everywhere, no matter what brand, sort of car it is. Some people prefer your 5-door cars, some people prefer your 2-door cars, some people prefer SUVs, Jeeps, X5s. Now, me personally, I didn't expect I was going to go for this particular car. Never, and probably never would have any of you have guessed I was going to go for this particular car. So let's get onto this video and I'll explain to you and show you what car I actually purchased and the reasons why.
What? Goddamn, get it done, will ya? Woo. When the blow up now, everybody's so unusual with it. Shit. But said times in his rhymes, cause his memories. We running through New York, so you know.
Okay. So you all know I purchased a brand new car. Now, when I say brand new, it's not technically brand new 2022 plate. It's just a new car to me, to maybe this channel and my other channel. So this car wasn't a car I ever expected to purchase, and I did not think I was even going to purchase it at all when it actually come to me. Now I'll get onto the story about this in, was it July? My neighbor obviously come to me asking me if I wanted to repair his car. It had been sitting in his garage. It was absolutely immaculate. He had it for nearly 7 years and he needed it repaired. I said, okay. Obviously I had the car lift in here. Everything was ready to go and the car wasn't a big car anyway, so I thought, why not just get it done? Easy job. As I started getting on with the car, we started realizing this car needed a lot of money put into it. And when I say a lot of money, I mean big money. And when I show you what brand it is and what car it is, you guys will actually understand what I mean by big money. And I will go over everything that's actually been done to it as well. So when we got it on the lift, we noticed that basically everything was shot underneath it. And it needed a massive overhaul, which the parts were gonna cost near around £4,000 for all the parts. Now, you can go cheap, but even cheap isn't cheap. The cheapest set you could find, even Chinese, were around £250 for two. So it is very expensive, and certain other parts are main dealer only, which is a must replace on these cars. If you don't, they will leak and end up leaving you at the side of the road from overheating. And most people, when they see this car, will know about the problems that actually come with owning one of these cars. Now, when I actually got it on the lift, and obviously my neighbor saw it, bearing in mind, he was 68 years old. He had had this car 7 years, enjoyed it. It was in the garage the whole time. When I brought it here, I actually fell in love with it and I wanted to buy it. Obviously, bearing in mind, I had just spent a lot of money building this shop, so I didn't have the money to purchase this straight away. And bearing in mind, he knew the work it needed, I knew the work it needed, and I did say to him I wouldn't give him the full value for this car because of everything it needed doing, because it would land me out of pocket if I ever come to sell it, which having this car now, there's been many times I've said I don't think I'd sell a car, but this one, I definitely don't think I would sell. It's been my daily now for quite a few months and I really enjoy the drive, the driving dynamics, the characteristics of the car, just everything about it, to the point I would buy another one in a heartbeat if it was cheap enough, because these cars are not worth paying top dollar for them, believe me on that. So yeah, we got it on the lift. My neighbor said he couldn't afford it. He was obviously retired, only working part-time when he needed to. Couldn't afford the expenses. He knew it needed to be done. That's the whole reason he sent it to me, because it had a leak. Couldn't figure out where it was. Then realized to get to the leak, a lot of things were gonna have to come down just to replace that, which he was going to need all new components, and it was going to be very, very expensive when we looked up the parts. So then, obviously, after I test drove it myself, when I actually gave it back to him, and we come up with a plan that I would buy the car from him. So a couple of weeks went by, put my M135i up for sale, someone bought it, and I ended up buying this car. I got this car very, very cheap, only true because of the issues it had, and my neighbour saw the amount of money it needed spending, which wasn't a lie, because we both done it on the computer, worked out everything it needed, and it was really expensive, really effing expensive. I thought BMW was expensive, but this takes expensive to a whole new level. The parts on this are near the same price as your other high exotic branded cars, and it's just ridiculous, but I'll explain the reason for the parts being so expensive in a minute when I reveal the car. So I ain't gonna talk anymore. I'll show you the car, I'll explain to you what I paid for it, and then I'll also explain what I've actually needed to do and the hell I've been through this car. Bearing in mind, this car was on my lift for 2 months. And if many of you know, I did say I was gonna come back to YouTube, and then I put a community post out saying I was delayed. This car was the reason I was delayed. It was an absolute nightmare to make it drivable and have it ready, because it hit that all-time full maintenance service that was really, really due, and it needed to be done. But let me show you the car and I'll explain the rest after. So here it is, guys. Some of you wouldn't have expected me to purchase one of these. Now, little does many people know, I was actually a very, very big fan of the Porsches, and especially the Porsche Boxster S in particular. And that's because I've always liked the design and the fact of it being a convertible. And as many of you guys know, many people say this is the poor man's Carrera convertible, but the handling on this, because it's a mid-engine car, is absolutely phenomenal and much better than you'll find on a 997 or the 911s, and everyone knows that. This is the equivalent of the Cayman S, and many of you will probably say, was Nathan my influence to this? And the answer is no. Me and Nathan actually weren't speaking when I bought this. Me and Nathan were actually started speaking again after I purchased this. Now, when you go and look at the market for a 987 Boxster S, and bear in mind this is the 3.4 version, guys, this isn't the 3.2, and it's Tiptronic. That's another reason why I purchased it. You guys know me, I don't like manual cars, and this was going to be no different. This is the Tiptronic version, and I only gave my neighbour £6,000 for it. When I got it, it was on 86,000 miles. I've been using it from July throughout the whole summer, still even now, and it's now just cleared 110,000 miles. Obviously, when my neighbour brought it here, as I said to you, it needed a lot of work doing. So I'm going to go into it. Since owning this car, we have had to do the front coffin arms, the rear coffin arms, obviously your tuning forks. If many of you guys don't know what they are, they're tuning forks that sit on the subframe that connect onto the coffin arms. We've had to do all new coolant lines. We renewed all the coolant lines front to rear, but that all sit on the subframe, so the subframe has to be dropped on these on the front to be able to get access to the front coolant lines. I overhauled every single one, as well as the hoses that run to the radiators on both sides, the long aluminium crossover pipes that run through the center of the car, as well as the two back pipes that go to the engine block. We've also overhauled all the eccentric bolts, all the adjusters. We've overhauled all the rear springs. The rear springs were broken on the rear, and sourcing springs for this car, I have never, ever had to search so hard for a stupid part like that, especially OEM factory springs. It was one of the most hardest parts I've ever searched for in my life. Now, many of you won't believe me, but the parts for this car are very, very expensive, and let me explain why. Every part on this car is shared with the 997, the 986, your 911s, your GT3s, everything is the same. So coffin arm prices are the same price regardless of what car you got. So they are very, very expensive. For all 4 coffin arms, we paid £1,200. That is just the coffin arms. That was without the tuning forks, which you need because the subframe's coming down anyway and they were shot. You needed to do them. Every bolt seizes on them. So you have an aluminium bolt going through the steel bushing. On the coffin arms, they seize together and you can't get them off. You need to use a saw and try and not cut the subframe as you cut through them bolts to cut them off and to put new bolts in. It is one big nightmare of a job. Obviously, when I had done all the rear springs, because it was an MOT failure, based on that, I had to do all new drop links because the drop links were seized in. Another common problem by Porsche, putting metal into aluminium, it just doesn't work. We had to do that as well. We've done so much on this car, it's been unreal. We had to, like I say, overhaul all the coolant pipes, front to rear, and that alone, the coolant pipes on this car were nearly £2,000 just to have done. And many of you will say that's not needed. That is a must job owning any Porsche 987. And I believe it's on the 986 and the 997s. The Porsche coolant lines do rot and corrode. Again, they're aluminium to aluminium. They're push lock ones. So they rust, corrode, and then start leaking coolant, which this one was no different and was doing. That's the whole reason why my neighbor asked me if I could look at it. He didn't realize it was gonna be that expensive. Bearing in mind, he bought this car on 44,000. So I've got all the history for it. I've got everything. It's only had 3 owners, which he actually bought it from Porsche Mayfair. He purchased it, and as I said, he drove it, and he's had it a long time anyway, so he's had his fun in it, so he didn't care about selling it. Like I said, purchasing the car as cheap as I did was worth it for me. Will you find another Porsche 987 for that price? No. I got very lucky, only purely based that it was, like I say, my neighbor's car. He asked me to do it. I didn't ever think I was gonna own a Porsche, ever. And I'll be honest with you guys, this was no influence from anybody apart from mine. When I saw it here, this is much more prestigious than having an M135i. Yes, it's naturally aspirated, but you think this thing makes 295 bhp. You got a mid-engine car, roof down in the summer. This is the best experience you'll ever get. The handling on a Porsche is so much better than it is on a BMW. And it is my new daily car. I've overhauled everything. The car drives absolutely brilliant. I've even done all new brake pads, all front and rear. We've done a BNC air filter. I've done new ignition coils, new spark plugs. We've done everything to this car, every single thing you can think of. Obviously, I've done all new oil. Literally, there's nothing I haven't done on this car, as well as the infamous, which goes out. Many of you will know this as well if you know Porsche. The starter motor likes to squeal. The starter motors like to go out on knees. Not a big job on this car, and that's purely because if it was on a 997 Carrera, the whole engine would have to be dropped because it's not easy to get access to. On this, obviously, you've got the panel behind the seats, which you can get to, and you can just remove the starter motor very, very easily, like I did. Water pump's already brand new on here. The neighbor did replace that. That was the last expense he actually done, and that's why he said he actually had enough. He put new wipers on as well. He didn't really do much. He only done basically things to get it for MOT, but unfortunately it failed the MOT on the rear springs. So that's how it ended up starting coming here, and then we ended up putting it on the lift. We found the corner lights were leaking. All the coffin arms had play in them, major play in them, and it just ended up going on and on and on. And to get to all the coolant lines, drop the subframe, you had to take the coffin arms off, you have to take the tracking forks off, and it goes on and on and on. And then you need all the new bolts, because all the bolts are rusted, you have to cut them off. So it can be a major, major expense. In total, I've got all the invoices for this that I spent, and it was £4,000 in total to overhaul the whole bottom end of this car, to make it drive like new, to make it run perfectly so it won't overheat in the summer or any kind of condition. It took a lot of money to invest into this car, and I'm gonna say, is it worth it? The prices when you look at Boxsters now and Caymans now, no, it's not. If any of you wanna buy yourself a Porsche, try and get one for under 10 grand, because they all need this work doing, and majority of people that are selling Porsches online will not have done this work. They are trying to pass it on to avoid themselves doing that job because they know of the expense. They're trying to get top money for their car and trying to avoid the maintenance on it and pass it on to someone else, and they're trying to get as much money out of that car as possible. My best advice to you, do not pay 12 grand for one of these, because at the moment I'm seeing these increasing, these Boxsters, anywhere from 15 grand, 16 grand, 15 grand, they're all over the place. But to get a 3.4, especially in Tiptronic, because it's very, very rare here. If you go on eBay, the majority of them are in manual. Find the Tiptronic, the price boots up. Is extremely, extremely rare, and it is very, very expensive. That's another thing I've done, was overhaul the whole transmission. Now the transmission, the pan was completely knackered, so I had to order a whole new pan. A new pan for the transmission was £290. That was a genuine Porsche one. All new bolts, all new oil and filter. We flushed it twice, cleared all the old crap out because the gearbox had never been serviced. So I did that bang on 100K. So that's all been serviced as well. Everything has been done on this car. There is need for nothing to be done on this car now, apart from just enjoy it. But that's why this car has been on my list for 2 months straight and not moved, purely because of all the maintenance it needed. Now I am forgetting all the other little things. I had to put on all new tires for this, and bear in mind it's a Porsche. Porsche want you to use only certified tires for their car. Now that ended up costing £1,200 just to put 4 new tires on this car, which Porsche recommend, obviously, for handling and braking. So I had to do that as well. So that was another major expense, and that's what I mean, their list keeps going on. Now, when I go on this certain website that I use to order the parts from for Porsche, if you compare the parts for a Porsche to a Ferrari, Porsche is actually more expensive to buy any part for than a Ferrari, and that is no joke, apart from the engine. Even the engines on these, if you look to buy a used one, you're looking in the range between 16 to 17 grand for just a new engine, a 3.4 one. They are very, very expensive, and don't even talk to me about automatic gearbox. You cannot find one for this car in the UK anywhere. In the USA, you find them everywhere. In the UK, there's literally none, bar none. But then again, they very rarely go wrong. They're the Mercedes gearbox, so they're the ZF 5-speed from Mercedes. So they're very, very reliable units. And I have serviced it and I flushed it twice, which was a lot of money as well, because the kit alone was £150 each time, which you get 7 litres of oil, so I needed to order 2 of them. So it was very, very expensive to flush that and get new filters in there as well. But above all, this car has been so well done. It is absolutely super drivable now throughout any weather, and it can go and live another 100,000 miles with no issue. Now, I do want to point out as well, before many of you actually start saying about this, bore scoring. Yes, it's a big, big problem on these, but this one has been very, very, very well looked after, that it doesn't have any kind of bore scoring. No ticking, no nothing. Runs perfect, comes up to temperature, and drives absolutely faultless with bags of power. Doesn't have no issues. It has been bore scoped 3 times in its life, and by Porsche made for as well, when they actually had it, and it didn't have no bore scoring, and before my neighbor actually bought it from them. And I haven't had no issues with it. Let's hope it doesn't happen, because if it does, it means the engine's gonna have to be taken out. I already sourced an engineering company local to me that can do the new sleeves and put in new cylinders if it comes to it anyway. So I don't have to worry too much about it, and it's not expensive, providing I take it all apart, which I'll end up doing. So again, it's not something I worry about having a lift here. Many of you guys know, it's mid-engine car, so the engine's on the back, drop it all down into a hydraulic trolley, and just take the engine out. It's not a big job at all. I mean, I think I've done the more serious jobs all at the front, so dropping the engine from the rear is literally nothing to it. 2 coolant hoses, the mounting bolts and the engine will just come straight down with the gearbox intact. So that's what I mean. If it comes to it, we'll do it with no issue. I'm not worried about it also. If anyone's gonna start going about bore scoring, the exhaust doesn't have no black soot on one side compared to the other. The exhaust is spotless. On the back, the paintwork is absolutely immaculate on this car. That's another reason why I fell in love with this, because finding a Porsche which has been pristine condition and been garaged all its life is very, very rare. And this one was a prime example of being garaged all its life. It's always been in the garage. I love the way the silver color absolutely pops. I'm not really a fan of silver cars, I'll be honest with you, but this one really does pop, and I just really, really enjoy the car. And I'm really happy I bought one, because years ago, even before I started YouTube, I always said I would have loved to own one of these cars, because you guys know me, I love convertibles. And you know, I was thinking of the 6 Series. Yes, it has 4 seats, but 2 seats in the rear are basically useless, just like a 997. And that's one of the reasons why, when this come up from my neighbor, I actually purchased it, because it met everything I needed. I've got my 5-door M5, I've got 5-door, the 530i, this is just perfect for when I want to cruise around, go around and get around quickly and go and get what I need to get. Boot's big enough for me. You've got 2 spaces, the front and the rear. And it's just an incredible car to drive on the country lanes where I am. All national speed limit roads. The car is just wonderful to drive. But that's the car, guys. That's the Porsche 987 Boxster S and the 3.4 version with 295 bhp. Okay, guys. So have you seen it now? You've now seen my Porsche 987 Boxster S. Now, I will start by saying, if many of you want to go and actually purchase one of these, because there's a lot of people that actually love Porsche. Now, don't get me wrong, it is a VAG group car, obviously, but what exotic car these days isn't a VAG car that everyone wants? Porsche, Lamborghini, you know, the R8s, everything is owned by the VAG group. So therefore, obviously, if you want to get one of these, you need to be ready for the Porsche tax. It is very, very, very expensive, and that is not a joke either. If you don't believe me, you can quickly go and look online, add up the parts that I've done to this car, and you'll quickly see a bill for around 4 to 5 grand very quickly. And it's dealer items only. You will not get any of them coolant pipes Chinese. They don't even make them. This is not like your BMW. Let me tell you right now, my M5 cost me less to overhaul than this. And that was only coolant lines and control arms. The M5, we had the rod bearings done. I've done the Vanos solenoids. Even all of that does not mount to the price of this. The M5 is a way, way much cheaper car to maintain and look after than this. Obviously, it's a bigger car. It doesn't handle as well as this. But if you are in the market for one of these, do bear in mind, you cannot treat these cars cheap. They are not cheap cars and they will not tolerate it. And parts are very, very expensive. When you've got Porsche, let me just say, Porsche dealers, any kind of dealers, which there's a lot of them that sell Porsche parts, see you come in and think you got big money. So do be ready for that, because everything, even to add a retrofit to this, is around £500. That's just for a cruise control stalk, which this one don't have, and a cowling for underneath. That was £500 just for a stalk, and that. It is highly, highly expensive. And that's a lot of the reason why people didn't spec these cars with everything when they purchased them, because of how expensive things were. Like I said though, if you are looking for one, I know there's going to be a lot of you on this channel that do love Porsche, because obviously their tracking ability and what they're capable of on the road. So who wouldn't like this? But there you have it, guys. This is the new car. I hope many of you will be happy with it. If you're not, we've still got the BMs anyway. This is my daily now. I prefer to use this. I wanted to go back to naturally aspirated. I like this a lot better than my M135i. It just got very, very boring knowing I could come up to speed very quick and not even have to work for it. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. It's BMW Dr. Dean here, and goodbye.